Are you willing to accept Christ's invitation to know Him more intimately, love Him more intensely, and follow Him more closely, and then go out into the world and live His good news? If you say yes, then you could be the 13th apostle. Join Dan Duddy and Tom Caffrey, the odd couple of Catholic radio, as they ride the radio waves 2 by 2 to share the goodness, beauty, and truth of Jesus Christ and His church. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the 13th apostle.
But I cry out to you, Lord. In the morning my prayer comes before you. Why do you reject my soul, Lord, and hide your face from me? I have been mortally afflicted since youth. I have borne your terrors, and I am made numb. Your wrath has swept over me. Your terrors have destroyed me. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the 13th Apostle, where we explore the good, beautiful, and true of the Catholic faith and the Catholic Church. This is Tom Caffrey with my partner, Dan Duddy. How you, Dan?
Hey, Tom. How are you, buddy?
All right. Oh, you must be in an unusually good mood. I don't think you ever said buddy.
I know.
I'm not
you know
sure.
What it is?
I think I know what it is, but go ahead. Tell us.
It's just habit from being now with my students all day long, because I'm at the age where I can't remember everybody's name. So they say, "Hey, Mr. Duddy," and I'm like, "Hey, buddy." Hey, buddy, and it's just a habit. So I kind of like, well, you're very youthful too, so it just kind of fell out that way. But why? What were you thinking? Did you like it?
Yeah.
Or no?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
You know what? It's I like it, and I've never pined for it. And, like after we get off the episode and other times during the week, and I say, Dan never calls me buddy. I wonder.
I have to tell you, though, I do remember your name. It was not because I forgot your name. I promise you that. Sometimes I wish I would forget your name, but not this time. It's still in me.
Oh, gosh. All right. Well, we have, you're special, but we have somebody else special on the line. So we're going to have a next conversation today with Sean Kelly. He's a therapist with Center for Christian Counseling and Relationship Development, otherwise known as CCCRD, and Sean is a licensed professional counselor. Welcome, Sean Kelly, to the 13th Apostle.
Hi. Yeah, I'm glad to be with you guys.
Wonderful.
That's great. Welcome, Sean.
Wonderful. So I reached out to you, Sean. I did a search, and I don't remember exactly all the details about that, but it was a search about trauma and about Christian counseling, and I came upon your website. You should know that I filled out the contact us form. I didn't get a contact back, so I persevered. You guys must be bursting with business. You see these contacts.
Yeah, we really pride ourselves on not letting. We try to get back to people like within hours. So I really don't know what happened there.
Oh, I thought you were going to say. See, we talked beforehand. Like you described yourself as a high church Anglican. So I thought you were, and we're going to get into that in a moment, but I thought you were just about to say we pride ourselves on keeping Catholics out of our contact.
Oh my gosh, no, not at all. We do actually have 2 Catholic therapists with us actually at the moment.
Oh,
as an Anglican, one of my biggest sadnesses, I think, is to see the animosity, especially among some Protestants, among some evangelicals towards the Catholic Church. Which I admire very greatly, and I'm thankful that we don't have that here in our practice.
That's a good thing, and yeah, definitely with having 2 Catholic therapists, I know it's a waste of time, but anyway, we won't spend any more time on that. It's good. We're glad to have you. Now, you have an interesting background. You have a degree in mechanical engineering, so. Tell us how you got to counseling, and you went to Cairn University in Pennsylvania, a Bible Institute, at least that's the description.
Yeah.
So we really want to know how you you moved from building bridges with steel, and concrete to building other bridges.
Yeah. So it's, as you can imagine, a long story of how I got from one to the other. But the short of it is, I was not a Christian growing up, and I kind of put all of my worth, my identity, my effort into being the best student I could be, and getting into the best school I could get into. And so, yeah, I found myself at the University of Pennsylvania studying mechanical engineering. I just, thought, well, that's something respectable that I can make money at. And it really was not ever a passion of mine. And I kind of went through a real disillusioning few years at college, which is a long story, but ultimately it kind of led me to a real journey searching for truth. What's the point of life? What is our purpose? And it was around that time, actually, where I started reading C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, which was a really, it removed a big obstacle for me intellectually. I thought, anybody that was a Christian was, I don't know, I just thought that I was so much smarter, too smart to believe in God. And C.S. Lewis, quickly, relieved me of that illusion. And I realized this guy's way smarter than I am, and his moral argument, apologetic for faith, just really grabbed a hold of me. And that's what kind of started me on my journey towards Christianity. And it wasn't long at all before I felt a particular calling to be a Christian counselor. And again, that's a long story, but faith was the biggest part of it for sure.
Interesting. Okay, so a while back I didn't read the whole book, but I read a fair amount of The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, yeah, excellent.
And also some work by a woman named Ronnie Janoff-Bulman, author of Shattered Assumptions. And I really have two, I guess I'll say, careers. I don't know. I've been in healthcare most of my adult life, and it's some type of ministry in most of my adult life. And I've seen a lot of people in trauma, and I see some patterns and whatnot. And one of the patterns is the avoidance, the avoidance of dealing with it.
Yeah.
And I see that much more in men than in women.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how do you, when either someone has come to you and they've had a trauma, they know they've had a trauma and they're owning up to it, or they come in for another reason, they can't sleep, your marriage is in trouble, whatever, and then you work with them and then you help them uncover a trauma. What is that like in the context of Christianity?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And they say, my faith I don't even know why I'm here. I should have strong enough faith to deal with it.
Yeah. So I think what's at the core of trauma is a kind of disintegration. And by that, I mean, we are created to be like these holistic beings, right? Body and soul together. But there's all these different dimensions of us: spiritual, emotional, behavioral, cognitive. And if someone experiences a trauma such that it damages them, in a profound way, it usually involves a kind of fracturing of these different aspects of the person. And so, you could say at the heart of what Christianity is the incarnation. Right? This is what sets us apart from other faiths. And at the very heart of the incarnation is God taking on flesh to restore, to make us whole again, not only with him, but within ourselves. And so I'd say the Christian life is one of pursuing wholeness. And trauma can be a major obstacle to that. So I I think, if I were talking to a person who's, and I can just understand it, the word trauma especially gets thrown around a lot these days. And, I don't want to blame my parents for, all my problems. And I need to take responsibility for my behaviors. And it's like, yeah, that's all great. And that's actually a good thing to do. But really taking ownership of that is, to take a look at these different aspects of yourself and pursue healing, pursue a reintegration. And I think, Christ is the one that does that. Even for the non-believer, I mean, there's a sense in which, like if you have, this might sound kind of silly, but if you have a paper cut and you just go to bed and you wake up and it's healed the next day, it's like, I believe that is the Logos, that is Christ working to do that healing. And the same thing is true emotionally. There are some wounds that are, healed just like without any attention required by us. We just sleep on it and we wake up and it's healed. Some, comment that I got from my wife that irritated me or something. It's like, probably doesn't need attention, but there are some things that do such damage that they need serious attention. And Christ is going to be the one that heals those things. But just like if I had a serious cut, I would have to go to the ER. If I had a blunt force trauma to my head, I would have to get that looked at. The same is true for an emotional trauma. That I might need an expert. I may need other people to assist me with that.
Sean, guilt. How often do we see guilt as being the impediment to the healing? If someone is feeling horribly guilty about maybe having caused the trauma or having been involved in the trauma, or maybe could have in hindsight done something to stop, what had happened. Where do you bring, I think, as Christians, we know the answer, but where do you bring Christ into this when you have someone that is not so faith-based and maybe perhaps it's the last straw, like the pain is so bad at this point that they've got to go to a higher power and they're coming in now with this severe guilt. And, I'm repeating myself, but that's what's actually impeding the healing.
Yeah, so actually, when you're saying that, I'm thinking it's probably shame rather than guilt. Sometimes we, just for some clarity, a quick definition that I give to distinguish the two. Guilt is I've done something wrong. Shame is there's something wrong with me.
I do believe, and I just wanted to get to a point. I do believe, and I know this for a fact. Well, first of all, I lost a son to a car crash, and I have friends, man. I love. Yeah, well, thank you, but I do believe there are people out there saying that I caused this. I am guilty, and I'm okay with my son because of my faith. It's a beautiful story of faith. But what do we do when someone says, "Yeah, I did this"? To the definition of guilt.
Yeah. Well, even so, like you guys mentioned avoidance earlier, right? So guilt and shame often go hand in hand. But I would say when it comes to a trauma, shame is really the culprit that causes us to avoid things. People are more willing to deal with guilt, actually, not always in healthy ways, right? A self-punishing kind of thing. But shame is really, what causes us to avoid talking about it. And, so we see this early on. We see this with Adam and Eve. We see their first response to their nakedness, to having their eyes open, to being self-conscious of their fallen status, was they felt ashamed and they tried to sew fig leaves to cover themselves. That didn't work. They tried hiding from God, presumably, kind of hiding from each other as well, and hiding from themselves. And there's something about the trauma response, and you just see this over and over again with people. So I guess I want to distinguish here, because there are traumatic events, kind of getting at your question, Dan, of guilt. So there are traumatic events, but that doesn't necessarily mean somebody is traumatized, right? So someone dying in a car accident is objectively a traumatic event, right? It's about as traumatic as it can get. But not everybody who witnesses that or knows somebody who went through that will be traumatized by it. They might feel guilt over that. That isn't necessarily trauma. So I don't know if that, if I'm muddying the waters here. I hope not. But I guess I can, to speak to your point, if somebody is racked with guilt, and they're having difficulty forgiving themselves, I think really the only answer for that person, and this is the conviction part of the conviction that led me to be a Christian counselor, is that person needs to experience forgiveness from God even before they can forgive themselves. Even though they might not be the guilty party, right? They might not actually deserve guilt, but they do need forgiveness, and they need to have an understanding of forgiveness. We love because He first loved us. We can't forgive ourselves unless we've first been have received that forgiveness. Because help me understand the scenario more, Dan. It's hard to talk to a counselor and not get super contextual, right?
I give a lot of talks. I assure you that I'm right on the same page with you, but I know there are others out there that suffer likewise. I mean, we went through gratitude first, and then came forgiveness and self-forgiveness, and it honestly healed the whole community. And it's just a powerful story of the manifestation of Christ in our lives. But we are blessed to be there. I had my faith walking into this.
Right.
Yeah. And I think Tom wants it. Thank you, Sean. I think Tom probably wants to climb in on this.
Well, I think what you just said, Dan, about you had your faith going into it, that's your touchstone. And I know that there are studies in trauma, and Sean, either this, Sean, or it wouldn't be any surprise to you, that those who have a touchstone, going into a trauma, they do better in withstanding the trauma and going through that trauma.
Yeah, we're finally at the point where even the secular psychological community is willing to admit that faith is a huge protective factor.
You can't say that loud enough, Sean. You can't say that loud enough, can you? Yeah.
And St. Ignatius, in his spiritual exercises, which are, you may know, they're wide open to the world. It's not just Catholics who learn and do the spiritual exercises. One of the points that he made, and I'll say makes in the spiritual exercises, it's really a question when you really get into the week, the it's called a week, but it's not 7 days. When you get into the phase where you're really going inward to what you've done, and he asked the question, why were you not destroyed? And I remember when I first came upon that, and that happens about 2 or 3 times in that section of the spiritual exercises. It really spoke to me to say, this is one of the reasons I was so drawn to the spiritual exercise, because it's consolation, but it's also, there's no avoidance. It's desolation that he really gets into. And then this question, why, the fact that you're doing these exercises, why were you not destroyed with either what happened to you or what you did to somebody else? And the answer to that is what Dan was saying, the faith going into it, it's the touchstone. You can always go to that. And so anyway, I'm not sure whether you see that with your clients, or whether you
Absolutely.
work for that, help them toward that.
Yeah, I think that's true in both cases. As I'm thinking more about the So the person who, like you were saying, Dan, who maybe was somehow participating in this trauma that maybe took the life of another, or what would you tell that person? How would you speak to that person if they were not a believer? I certainly wouldn't say repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. I wouldn't go all John the Baptist on them. I would want them to, experience compassion, a suffering with, a willingness to really even hear them out, even their darkest thoughts, like get it all out there. I'm not going to immediately tell them, well, you shouldn't actually feel guilty. I actually really want to go with them there to their deepest kind of levels of pain. Let them know that I'm not scared off by that. And there's this idea of being Christ in the counseling room. That's really the main thing to always keep in mind. Right? So I might not always have a great answer for them of like what they're supposed to do now.
But you're with them.
What's that, Tom?
You're with them. You may not have the answer, and you can't, in your profession, you can't have a ministry of silence.
Correct.
But you're not giving them, as Dan and I have talked about many times, the pious platitudes.
Yeah. Take 2 scriptures and call me in the morning.
Exactly.
That's exactly right. Hey, you know what I'm feeling here, though. I'm feeling that you're building identities or resurrecting the original identity in your client, the person that's been, we'll say, put in your keep by your witness. So, and you have a very humble witness, and that's extremely inspiring for a client, because this is what I see. So there's a pre-trauma identity that's happy-go-lucky, everything's going fine, and then bam, then this trauma comes for whatever way, and now you're in that trauma, and you handle it a certain way, and because you're probably a good, solid, sensitive person, you take way too much shame or guilt, whichever way you want to go with that, and now you have an identity that's just dragging its feet, its head is down, tail between the legs. And by you going back to them and showing that love and understanding and compassion, then they go back to the original identity. And as they creep back toward that, I'm assuming then you can really get into the fact that, hey, you know what? You have nothing to do with the fact that you exist. There's a reason why you're here, and you're a creation. And I think it's your love, which is God, as you know, it's great talking to a fellow Christian, that it resurrects that original identity and brings them back to, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think there's something there. It's really hard to, imagine like how does faith enter the conversation with this particular person? Because we have this kind of faceless, nameless person that we're talking about. So I really try to get to know. I guess that's obvious, but I take like a very detailed history with every client that I have. I really want to get to know what it feels like to be in these different relationships in these different parts of their lives. And I would say, the conversation usually goes there. At the very least, people know that they're coming to a Christian counseling practice if they're coming to us. So it's the name's right there on the door. Right? So I think that gives me more opportunities to kind of bring things up. And we do have non-Christians that come, that get referred by friends, and it's a conversation we usually have early on. How much do you want to incorporate faith into this place? But I think if you're just speaking more generally to how do you interact with a non-believer who's going through something like this, just as a layperson or whatever, I think embodying Christ is really the main thing that you want to be doing. I mean, we have the Gospels to look at to see what God is like, to see, when he was confronted with somebody who had been through some traumatic things. And sometimes, those, like the woman at the well, it seems like a pretty traumatic place that she's in. She's isolated from her whole community. And Christ meets her with truth, but also with love. And she does return to some kind of original identity, like you were saying, I think. We don't know what she was like before, but she goes back and she's part of her community now. She doesn't care. She has no shame. Come see this man who told me everything I ever did.
Yeah, man. Some will be shunned by the community, and others will pull themselves from the community.
Well, I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed. We are out of time. When we do episodes like this, the time just goes so quickly. In a few weeks, we're going to be remembering the greatest trauma. But if anyone had a touchstone, it was our Lord. So, Sean, we'd love to have you back again because we're just scratching the surface with some of this topic. Where can people reach you? How can they reach you?
The quickest way to find us would be to go to cccrd.org. 3 C's, rd.org. There's like a profile there for each of the therapists that are there. That has my contact info on there, my number and my email. If anybody wants to get in touch, probably shoot me an email would be the quickest way. And so we're based out of South Jersey mostly. We are expanding into Pennsylvania now. And most of your listeners, I'm guessing, are in the Boston area. So I don't know if that seems like too far of a drive, maybe.
No, they're all over. I mean, Dan and I are based in New Jersey. But this is streaming as well. So right. So that's
So if you're in the kind of the greater Philadelphia area, there might be a location that's not too far away.
Wonderful.
Again, I'd be happy to hear from anybody.
Wonderful. All right. Well, Sean, thanks again. Enjoyed the conversation, and we would like to have you back again. So
I would love that.
That's great.
That'd be awesome, Sean. Yeah, please come back. All right, let's close this up. Stay tuned, folks, for the Angelus and Your Prayer Intentions with Peter and Jenny.
WQPHradio.org. Wonderful conversations like this come in part because of your support, dear friends out there. God bless you, Danny.
God bless you, Tommy. God bless you, Sean. And God bless you all.
God bless you all.
Thank you for listening to the 13th Apostle with Dan Duddy and Tom Caffrey. For more information on Dan, visit his website at www.danduddy.com or email dcduddy@gmail.com. Tom's website is faithpilgrims.com or email trcaffrey@faithpilgrims.com. How about you? Will you be the 13th Apostle?